Episode 9, Revolutions and Resistance, 1960s to the 1980s, before the bricks flew. Let's talk about the rainbow filter, the world outside the closet. If you were straight in the 1960s, America looked like it was stepping into a Technicolor dream. The post-war boom meant more families in shiny new suburbs, 2 cars in every driveway, TVs in the living room beaming, the Beatles, Bewitched, and Walter Cronkite into your home. You could watch the moon landing in '69 and feel like humanity was limitless. The civil rights marches were reshaping the South. The anti-war movement was swelling on college campuses. The pill was giving women more control over their bodies. Woodstock promised peace, love, and music. And for the moment, it felt like the youth could actually change the world. It was the age of miniskirts and Motown, bell-bottoms and Bob Dylan, color TV, affordable air travel, and the first Super Bowl. If you fit the mold, it was easy to believe you were living in a golden age. But the rainbow didn't shine for everyone. For queer folks, that same era of freedom and progress barely cracked open the closet door. The TV shows didn't show us. The songs didn't sing about us. At least, not in code. And while straight America danced in the sun, we were still dodging shadows. You could go to jail for kissing the wrong person in public, lose your job for wearing the wrong clothes, get beaten legally for existing in the wrong bar. The sexual revolution barely touched us, unless it labeled us as perverse. Let's talk about queer life before Stonewall. Picture it. New York City, late 60s, your love life isn't private, it's evidence. And if you're caught, you could lose your job, your home, your family, your freedom, all in one night. Police raids weren't random. They were scheduled like clockwork, especially on weekends when bars were full. They'd line you up, check IDs, and if your license said F, but you were wearing pants instead of a skirt, boom, you were in violation of New York's 3-article rule, which required at least 3 pieces of clothing appropriate to your assigned sex. They didn't need an actual crime. You were the crime. And bars. The mafia ran most of them, not because they loved queer people, but because they could make money off of us. They'd pay off the cops, serve overpriced, watered-down drinks, and still the raids came. American Psychiatric Association still called homosexuality a mental illness, justifying treatments like electroshock therapy, chemical castration, and even lobotomies. Even activism had limits. The Mattachine Society and Daughters of Billiots lobbied for rights, but in suits, skirts, and silence, no touching, no flamboyance, respectable only. That might have worked for some, but for drag queens, street kids, trans folks, and anyone who couldn't or wouldn't hide, the closet wasn't an option. By the summer of '69, New York was fed up, and all it needed was one little spark. The night Stonewall blew. June 28th, 1969. It's after midnight at the Stonewall Inn, a dim, sticky-floored, mafia-run bar in Greenwich Village. The jukebox is spinning, the dance floor is crowded, and the drinks are weak, but flowing. For once, people relaxed. Then, the sirens. The music cuts, the lights flash on. Cops storm in with flashlights and bark orders. This was supposed to be just another shakedown. Take some bribes, make a few arrests, humiliate the patrons, and leave. But not tonight. Something in the air snapped. Maybe it was the heat, maybe it was the funeral earlier that week for Judy Garland, a queer icon whose death hit hard. Maybe it was just years of swallowing fear and shame. Whatever it was, the crowd didn't scatter. Stormy DeLarve, a black butch lesbian, fought back first, shouting at the crowd to do something. Drag queens resisted, being shoved into paddy wagons. Bottles flew. Trash cans became barricades, and suddenly, Christopher Street was a war zone. The riots raged for several nights. Cops were shocked. This wasn't supposed to happen. Queers weren't supposed to fight back. But here we were, refusing to be silent anymore. Let's talk about the movement after the Molotovs. In the months after Stonewall, the Gay Liberation Front and Gay Activist Alliance formed, trading polite pickets for loud protests, sit-ins, and zaps that disrupted public events. The first Pride March took place a year later. Not a parade, but a radical protest. No corporate floats, no cops, just people marching to be seen. Queer liberation wasn't a single wave, it was many currents. Let's talk about lesbian communes. Some queer women, frustrated with sexism in mixed groups, formed lesbian separatist communities. These were rural communities where women lived, worked, and loved outside of patriarchal systems. Tensions rose between radical feminists, gay men, and trans people, with some groups excluding trans women entirely. The unity of the post-Stonewall years began to fracture. Then comes Harvey Milk and the White Night Riots. In 1977, Harvey Milk became one of the first openly gay elected officials in the United States. His assassination in 1978, along with San Francisco's Mayor George Moscone, sent shockwaves through the movement. When his killer, Dan White, received a light sentence, the White Night Riots erupted. Another reminder that queer rage could boil over into the streets. Let's talk about ballroom culture. Meanwhile, in New York's Black and Latinx queer trans communities, ballroom culture blossomed. Houses led by mothers became chosen families for youth cast out of their homes. Balls were a space to strut, vogue, and throw shade in categories from realness to high fashion. It was art as survival, beauty born in the middle of rejection and poverty. The plague years and ACT UP. Then came the 1980s, and with them, the AIDS crisis. Gay men, trans women, and people of color were dying in staggering numbers. While the government looked the other way, President Reagan didn't even say the word AIDS publicly until thousands were already dead. The community mobilized, caring for the sick, burying the dead, and demanding action. ACT UP AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power took the streets with die-ins, storming the FDA and hanging banners from the stock exchange. They forced the world to see what it wanted to ignore. The AIDS memorial quilt grew across the National Mall. Each panel a name, a story, a life stolen. It was grief as a protest, love as defiance. The revolutions of the 1960s through the 80s weren't tidy. They weren't unified, but they were relentless. From the first brick at Stonewall to the last panel sewn on the quilt, queer people refused to be erased. And every pride flag, every queer candidate elected, every drag queen reading to kids, all of it is built on the back of that era's resistance. They fought so we could dance, and they danced so they could keep fighting. Thank you for watching Queer History, and I'll see you next week.